Artificial intelligence effects on the workforce, transit, and more. We'll talk today with Maryland's Lieutenant Governor on Builders Live. Hey, I'm Chris Wink. I'm the co-founder, CEO, and publisher of Technically, the news organization with a community of technologists and entrepreneurs. AI is rippling through conversations, whether you like it or not. That means it's having a conversation, too, around workforce strategy. That, among many other topics, I'm going to get to talk about with Maryland's Lieutenant Governor, Aruna Miller. Lieutenant Governor, thank you so much for being here.
I'm thrilled to be here, Chris.
Appreciate that. All right, I cheeky or not, we're going to touch on artificial intelligence, so sorry for everyone who's bored out of their minds of this topic. I'm curious, for starters, are you using whatever basket of AI tools yourself personally, in work and otherwise? Tell me a little bit about your own workflow if these are tools you're paying attention to.
Chris, I have never used AI before.
That's saying something.
No, April Fools.
Oh, I was say maybe Google search. All right, fair. All right, okay. You have it back April Fool. You did get.
Look, I come from a family that does a lot of pranks on one another, so I couldn't wait to do that one on you and your listeners.
Well, you did get me. I will admit. I was like, all right, I'm gonna have to recalibrate and say, well, but to be clear, I have absolutely done those conversations with those who are like vehemently anti. So I'm quite open to the dialogue of the moment. But all right, so tell me the April Fool's joke.
Okay, so I absolutely use AI in every single day of my life. Look, I'm an engineer, and I see AI as a tool like any other technology, right? So oftentimes I use it to think through problems from a different angle. It's like having another set of eyes, right? And I can tell you that AI is used already and deployed in Maryland state government. Microsoft Copilot is embedded right into our email system. So I'm able to respond to inquiries more efficiently, not just me, but all state employees. And we have more than 50 state agencies that are using AI tools to help draft reports, analyze data, build simple chat tools without needing to write code. And we're also using AI models to accelerate benefits delivery and verified documents. Because at the end of the day, this is about delivering for the people of Maryland. Now, at a personal level, I will say I use AI to translate really complex technical documents and put it into plain language, because I think this is really important when I have to meet the public and I have to communicate this, whether it's a policy issue or it's a decision we made recently, whatever it may be. I use it oftentimes for that.
Well, and so one of the big existential debates we are having is, when are these tools of efficiencies creating more opportunities, deepening, strengthening work, versus when are they taking away opportunities, either creating efficiency by way of fewer opportunities or clouding and worsening an experience. Talk to me about how you're weighing that. Like any state government, it's an enormous organization itself, but you also project out for a state. How are you weighing the benefits versus the costs?
Sure. And of course, with any new technology, Chris, there are going to be benefits versus costs. But at the end of the day, we need to be mindful about how often we rely on AI, and it should support our thinking and not replace it. Because the real value isn't the tool, it's how we're using it. So in state government, we absolutely believe that there is a place for it. Again, at the end of the day, it's about being able to deliver services to the people of Maryland. So can the AI tool be able to do this? And we found numerous ways, and it can be deployed in that manner.
Well, I had an energetic conversation with a couple of economic developers at a conference earlier this week, who kind of threw it in my face of like, I can get yelled at overconfidently by anyone on any opinion about AI's effects, disruptive, creating opportunity, the like. And so the two economic developers I was talking to, not in Maryland, these are other states, we're saying like effectively our workforce strategy remains somewhat unchanged, because we're being told it will create new jobs and destroy jobs at the same time. There's so much noise that we're a little bit waiting and seeing. My reporting shows lots of places are very quietly doing that. Like, I don't know how to respond to this. There's debates around BLS jobs projections. There's all kinds of conversations. When you're in a conversation about helping to shape Maryland's workforce strategy, how, if at all, is AI's effects projected, real, theoretical, showing up in what actual bets do you think you can make for the people of Maryland and beyond?
That's a great question, Chris. Look, here's the thing. Everybody's talking about AI and what it means for jobs. And we hear it, Governor Moore and I, as we go across the state of Maryland. People are asking us, is AI going to replace me? Here's what we know for sure. AI is going to change almost every single job that we know today. Is it going to happen overnight? No, probably not, but it's already happening all around us. Look, AI is starting to take on routine tasks, right? And at the same time, greater expectations are rising from that particular job or that individual. Jobs are disappearing, aren't just disappearing overnight, but they are changing. And people have to be prepared for this. And that's kind of the strategy that Governor Moore and I are using. We are no longer just preparing people, as you stated, for a specific job. We're preparing them to be nimble and to adapt to changes. So that means investing in our lighthouse sectors. Governor Moore has been laser beam focused on this. Our lighthouse sectors include AI, cyber, quantum, life sciences, and aerospace. But just as importantly, we need to be able to build adaptable skills within our workforce. So on the workforce side, we're leaning in. It's not just about allowing employees to have access to AI, but it's about equipping our state workforce to use it responsibly. So that means understanding its limits, its biases, and we know it has a lot of biases, and applying human judgment. And we want to make sure that our state workforce are equipped with adaptable skills like digital fluency, critical thinking, and know that our workforce can grow as the technology evolves. So lots of different things but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that whatever skills that they learn, that it can transfer across different roles and different industries.
Well, I want to move on in a sec, but you touched on quantum, which is a good example that we technically have for 20 years of reporting balance that often the emerging technology of the moment is a lot farther out than people expected. We saw that with AI, though, that for many years we were told that ML would have its moment, and for many years machine learning did not have its moment. And then there was a particular happenstance of the right technology, the right user interface, the right moment kind of snapped into focus. Quantum looks like that. Going back decades, we thought we better understood quantum mechanics. We thought we were going to harness its abilities. Maryland has made some real bets here. Maybe talk to me about just looking at the portfolio that a state must have between jobs we know we have now, experimental forms that could have consumer applications. And I'm sure there's lots of people who tell you they're here any minute, but I've sometimes been fooled before. So talk to me about balancing that portfolio between the jobs you know and the jobs that may come.
Yeah, absolutely. For example, you mentioned quantum. So we have passed a bill called the Decade Act, which focuses entirely on these lighthouse sectors, and one of them being quantum computing. And at the University of Maryland, we have what's called the Discovery District. And right there on campus, we have IonQ. This is one of the first quantum computing companies that has an IPO and that went public. And it's doing tremendous work. And we want to continue to lean into this because we absolutely believe quantum is going to be part of the future, and part of the future that just not only creates jobs, but is able to solve 21st century challenges. And that includes everything from climate change to how we're able to provide medications in the health industry to the finance sector. So we absolutely are leaning into this. Again, we're not looking at everything under the sun when it comes to bringing jobs to Maryland. Our focus is the lighthouse sectors.
Why do you like what's the lighthouse metaphor do for you?
Well, it's kind of like, if you're out there in the sea, you see the lighthouse, right? Lit up. And that's your kind of North Star to get to where you need to go. And that's how we see ourselves. This is our North Star to be able to diversify our economy, to bring greater jobs here. And not just jobs, as I said, these are really the industries that are really going to help humanity out in the future.
Mm. Well, let me segue something that I thought was interesting in your biography is background in transportation engineering. Didn't know that.
Yeah.
Maryland, I have always viewed as interesting. Dense state, in between dense region, one of the best transited parts of our country. But as infrastructure builds go, there's always contested ones. There's also swirling technology. Will autonomous vehicles change our infrastructure? Talk to me a bit about like how you're weighing the Maryland transit infrastructure strategy alongside resident feedback, pushback, hollering at you, new technologies. What is your bet as a transportation engineer on the future of transit in Maryland and beyond?
Okay, well, that's a lot to unpack. So let me start.
I got limited time with you, so I have 5 questions in one. Why not?
I'm good with that, Chris. So let me first talk about autonomous vehicles. So I happened to be at the RSA convention just last month, and I rode a Waymo for the very first time.
Okay.
And I got to tell you, as a transportation engineer, that was a moment. Look, I spent my career designing infrastructure built around one constant, and that is that a human being would always be behind the wheel. And suddenly, I'm sitting in this Waymo in the back seat, and there's no driver in the front. And let me tell you something. San Francisco streets, I don't know, I'm sure you've been there, Chris. They're not your ordinary streets, okay? You got the steep hills, narrow streets, pedestrians, buses, cars, everything happening all at once. And this Waymo is navigating it all. While I'm sitting in the back seat, this pedestrian pops out of nowhere from the parallel parking spot, and the Waymo immediately hit the brakes, and the pedestrian walked across. I think if it was an average driver, that could have been an incident that, a crash that could have occurred. So, but here's the awesome thing about these cars. They are equipped with 30 cameras that can see 360 degrees all around and can even see up to 2 football fields in length. So really, they can see a lot more than the human eye. So, and they've already been deployed in California and Arizona and Texas and Georgia. So my understanding is they're now coming to Maryland. We have not approved all the legislation that goes with actually deploying them here in the Baltimore region, but I think that will happen eventually. So what do I think is the takeaway from this as a transportation engineer? Look, Maryland is a very diverse state. Yes, we have a lot of our population that lives in the urban areas, but we also have places like Western Maryland and the Eastern Shore and Southern Maryland that are not like our urban regions. So one size is not going to fit all in the case when it comes to the state of Maryland. Now, when it comes to transportation and transit, look, that's an area that we have to lean into as much as we can. Transportation is really about being available to all users, not just the individuals that have their own cars or Waymos, but also people that don't have access to that. So we got to make sure our transit is really invested in, that it's reliable, it's dependable, it's equitable, and affordable. And as designers, when we're building for infrastructure, for all of Marylanders, we have to consider all of Marylanders, not just, those, again, that have a car, but there's also individuals that are disabled, where they may be hearing impaired, or so many other factors that play into it. So when we are building infrastructure, we have to be measuring for every single individual. So I believe that Waymo could really play a role in all of this. To make sure that our systems particularly our transit systems, are more connected, and it can really play a big role in supporting the first and last mile connections when it comes to transit.
Mm. Let's stay with that for a thread. One, I'm super interested in your background here. I just filed a story for Technically last week, pulling from the growing consensus among the academic literature of the trade-offs of ride-hailing, ride-sharing. Like most of my reporting career around economics has tended to show, it's more trade-offs than anything. So ride-hailing overall appears to have led to more urban congestion. It kind of induced more demand for driving, but did solve some real problems in rural and exurban counties. It did extend, as you kind of alluded to, some last mile coverage there. That appears to have been the trade-off. It was less competition with taxi drivers initially, more competition with existing transit infrastructure. And I think I'm only sharing that to say, I was there in 2013 when ride sharing was rolling out in Baltimore. We were reporting on that then in the moment. Not everyone's projections, negative or positive, turned out 10, 15 years later. So that's always really taught me that often in the moment it's very difficult to see how the unintended consequences will play out of an emerging technology. You are a transportation engineer who has championed transit infrastructure investments in Maryland. You're also someone who's, tech open enough that you've ridden in a Waymo and been open to it. So maybe talk to me about how you are weighing the current transit infrastructure investments that you're helping to champion in Maryland with that future. Why are those investments still so important as you see them?
Oh, they're absolutely important, Chris. As a matter of fact, Governor Moore and I have a bill in called the Maryland Transit Housing Opportunity Act of 2026. And this is really about building housing closer to where the jobs are, where transit centers are, right? That's really where people are looking to move toward now. I got a really interesting story of a business owner. He had a high-tech company up in Gaithersburg, Maryland. And he told me one of the biggest challenges that he faced in getting employees to come and work for him, they all asked him the question, do you have transit close by? And in this particular location, he didn't. He literally moved his entire company of several hundred people 7 or 8 miles down 270 in Montgomery County so he could be near a transit center, right? So employees could have access to it. So the demand is really out there that this generation particularly really wants to have access to transit as much as possible. And I think that this goes right into the bill that the Governor Moore and I have introduced to make sure that we provide more housing near transit-oriented developments. And we're leaning into things like the Purple Line. We're really excited about that being available to the public here in the next year and a half or so. That will make sure anytime you build transit, you have a whole host of economic development that takes place in the perimeter right around that region. So it's good for the economy, it's good for the environment, it's good for the people because anybody can use transit.
We are coming up on or around the 2-year anniversary of the Key Bridge collapse. Maryland's building stuff. We also are having a very big national conversation. It feels like it's striking very much at the heart of the American identity of if we still build stuff fast enough, effectively enough, cost efficiently enough. You're a transportation engineer. Help me understand this. You have more training than I do. Do Americans still build stuff well? Can we build big, ambitious stuff effectively? And are we doing it in Maryland?
We absolutely are doing that, Chris. Americans build great things and will continue to do so. But here's what some of the challenges, what happens with large capital projects. When you build projects like the Key Bridge or the Purple Line, look, that means democracy plays a big role into this. It means that community, elected officials, labor, everybody plays a role into how that project is going to be designed, how it's going to be built. So not just that, but when you're building big projects like this, you have a lot of impacts on the environment, from wetlands to wildlife to air quality. So you have to make sure the project addresses all that. And then you need to get community input. You got to have public hearings. Then you got to get a buy-in from all the various, federal, state, and local leaders. Then you need to get permits. And when you go from one agency to another to get a permit, oftentimes they're in conflict with one another. So because in the United States and in the state of Maryland, we want to have all people play a role into large capital projects, because at the end of the day, those capital projects are being paid by taxpayers. So they have every right to weigh in on the project. And what often happens as a result of that is everybody's got a lot of ideas of how a project can be built. So you may have a project that has 20 different alternatives that we have to analyze at a pretty great detail, and then show why one alternative is the best one versus the other 19 that weren't that good. This all takes time to do. And so I think that's part of the reason why capital projects take a very, very long time. And I know that creates a lot of frustration among the public because they want to see it go up in 2 years, in 1 year, in 5 years. But the reality is it's not that hard. I mean, it's very, very difficult to do so. It's not that easy to just build a project that quickly.
I'm very keyed in on you as transportation engineering background. When you look at other states, other regions around the country with their build times, construction timelines for big projects, do you have in your own mind, are you like, you're like, well, that sounds ambitious, or are you ever like, you got to be able to build it faster? I guess what I'm really asking is, you as transportation engineer, do you have a cutting stance on what good, high quality, realistic construction infrastructure timelines should look like? Is that something that's running through your head when you look around the country?
Look, absolutely there is. But here's the thing, Chris, every project is different in every single way. There are some commonality amongst all of them, but then there's challenges that you never saw coming, right? I mean, right now we're dealing with tariffs. That means the cost of that project is going to escalate to a new level that we never anticipated before. Or all of a sudden, let's say you are doing some work at a particular location and you discover a graveyard that you didn't realize that none of the plans ever showed. So there's always going to be things that are going to pop up. And so what I say is we always have to be prepared for the things that we never thought were going to show up. So anytime we're building a timeline, we always have a certain amount that says, okay, add another 6 months to a year to that project timeline, because we know there's going to be things that are going to pop up that we never anticipated.
What's the right, I think I mean this pretty genuinely, what's the right counterweight to any like timeline or budget build out? Like, other political parties, resident feedback, media, otherwise, like when you look at the Keybridge timeline or whatever, what is the right amount of pushback or challenging to say, are we doing this cost effectively enough? Are we doing this at the right speed? What is the right amount or direction of pressure on anyone's build out?
Well, again, when the public comes in and they want to see the project built a certain way, it's great. They want to have a bike path, a sidewalk, they want to have trees, whatever it may be. But what they don't realize is all of that is going to extend the project timeline and escalate the price of the project. So, but they want it done as quickly as possible. So there's always going to be trade-offs, right? But we need to hear them out. That's the most important thing. No project, no capital project ever gets built in the state of Maryland or anywhere where you don't get the feedback from the community. You got to hear it, because a lot of times they are the ones who are closest to the problem. And they can tell us things that we never thought about. Look, as engineers, we're sitting in our office, we're looking at things on a piece of paper or on a computer screen, but they actually are living there daily. So we absolutely believe those closest to the problem, are going to be closest to the solution. So we want to hear what they have to say, but that all takes a long time.
if that's on the expense side, let's go a little bit to the revenue side. We
Sure.
are in a national conversation on who pays their fair share or not, and I think people are all over the map on this at the moment. Technically, did my dear colleague Marie Eberhardt did some good reporting on a Maryland tech tax. It came up short in its projections. One of many strategies. I just want to talk a little bit more about the strategy of who's paying their fair share or not. When we talk about building ambitious projects, I got to think a leader like you knows there's the expense side and the income and revenue side. So I guess talk to me a bit about balancing the budget, as it were, either metaphorically or quite literally, and something like a tech tax being a small but certainly a representative thing for a community of who is or needs to be contributing more. Talk to me a bit about your own strategy to this conversation.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Chris. So here's the thing. Every year, the governor has to submit a balanced budget, and it goes through the legislature. So for right now, it is actually about to be passed, and our FY 2027 budget is balanced, and it has no taxes nor fees that are being introduced. Okay, so that's first thing. So, but I want to talk about something else, and I want to be really honest about the moment we're in right now.
I like that.
There's a lot of economic uncertainty right now across the nation, driven by a lot of federal policy shifts. In Maryland, we've seen real impacts, Chris, including significant job losses. In fact, over 25,000 federal jobs have been lost in Maryland due to the recent domestic economic policies of our current administration. So this is more than any other state. But at the same time, this same administration has cut healthcare, food assistance programs, and then, of course, there's rising costs at the pump, higher grocery prices, rollbacks to clean energy incentives that are driving up energy costs. So all of this is playing a big role into the uncertainty that Marylanders and Americans across the nation are facing right now. So when it comes to our budget, so yes, costs are rising and needs are growing. So how do we address this? In our current budget, we have targeted cuts and other cost-saving measures, making critical programs more sustainable. And we're looking at how we can run the government smarter. And this is where AI comes in. We're investing in our workforce and giving people the tools they need to do their jobs more effectively. And again, delivering the better results for Marylanders. So the revenue side, again, I talked about how much job losses we have, but here's what the governor's doing. He is diversifying our economy, again, focusing on the lighthouse sectors. And so we're not just talking about supporting, for the short term, but how are we doing this for the long-term economic strength? And we have the Decade Act, as I already said, which focuses on the lighthouse sectors. But here's what I want to tell you. During the past 3 years, the Aruna Miller administration, we have created over 100,000 new jobs, more than the previous administration has done in the past 8 years. There's been over 35,000 new businesses created in the past 3 years, $10 billion in private investment. And we have global companies like AstraZeneca, Hitachi Railcar, Samsung Biologics, which, by the way, I was just there yesterday as they did their ribbon cutting in Montgomery County. And then we have the Spear that is going to be coming here to Prince George's County. So these are all companies that are going to create new jobs. And again, in the jobs that we're looking for. Now, you talked about the tech tax. You're right. The tech tax has been reported to have come up short in revenue. But here's the thing. This is only the first quarter it's been in place. So we don't have a large data set yet. And it's going to take some time to realize its true revenue. And we'll see where that goes.
Thanks for that. And look, like I am a believer in the theory of American federalism, that we want a bunch of states to take out go off on different paths and try to learn from them, and in some kind of like overly earnest, ideal fashion, learn from each other so we all can get stronger.
Yeah.
Maryland's core offering for my 15 plus years of pretty closely following, watching, core offering has always been one of the brainiest, best educated, strongest workforce states in the country that has come with relatively high tax offerings. Schools are good, offerings are high, infrastructure is there, taxes are high. And so when we talk to entrepreneurs and technologists, there tends to be that tension that someone will either identify more with the brainiest, one of the brainiest states in the country, or will more weigh the kind of perception of an onerous tax regime. How do you think of that Maryland offering? We have population growth, but relatively steady. If ultimately where people move is a kind of signal, people voting with their feet, what's the big metric maybe that's your guiding light, to use your lighthouse metaphor? Like, how do we know the Maryland portfolio is the strongest it can be? What do you ultimately want for Maryland with all this to go into it? Is it like more people should want to move here, more people should thrive? What's the metric that you look at the end of the day to know that the work is working?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Chris. Look, here's the thing. Governor Moore has always said this, that Maryland is asset rich and strategy poor. So when we came into this administration, we were laser beam focused on our strategy. And as you said, Maryland has incredible assets. Number one, we're home to over 60 federal agencies. We have over 20 military installations, 57 colleges and universities, and 4 HBCUs. Really remarkable, academic institutions here. And we have an incredible talent pool, right? In STEM-oriented talent pool. So I will tell you, we have met with business owners, and that's what we continue to do, Governor Moore and I. We continue to go across the state and speak to large business owners, small business owner, and everything in between. And I'll tell you what they tell us. When they want to expand in the state of Maryland as a business, or if there's businesses that we're trying to bring over to here in the state of Maryland, here's what business owners look for. Number one, they look for a talent pool, which we have. They look to see, is there a good quality of life there? And we absolutely have that, as you said, with our great public school system. They look to see, is there transportation access that's readily available for their employees? We have that, comes in all different forms, including especially our transit. And then they looked for regulatory process as well as taxes. So when we talked to them, we realized we had the top 3. So it was really down to the regulatory process, modernizing it, or taxes. When we asked these business owners, which of those is most important to them, every one of them said, modernizing the regulatory process. That's exactly what we've been doing with the Procurement Act, trying to modernize it as much as we can. And this is where AI comes into it. AI can really make it much more efficient, the regulatory process, making sure that people are able to get their permits that they've applied for, getting through the red tape a lot quicker. We are really focused on doing this. That said, that doesn't mean that they don't care about taxes. Look, nobody wants to raise taxes, Chris. Governor I certainly don't want to do that. But when we see the needs of Marylanders and where they're at, we have to be socially responsible at the same time. We don't want Marylanders to be suffering because we don't have the safety nets in place. If we don't have the safety nets in place, guess what? We're all going to feel it, right? It's going to lead to crime. And then people feel unsafe. And then people move out of the state. And let me tell you, we have done an extraordinary job in bringing crime down during our administration, almost like at a 40% decrease across the state when it comes to violent crime and homicides. And Baltimore City has seen the lowest crime in the past, I think, like 50 years that since they've been following crime trends when it comes to homicides and violent crime. So there's a lot of good that we are doing, and absolutely there's areas in which we need to improve. And how do we do that? By bringing people to the table. really making it collaborative to hear from them and what we can do that's reasonable.
Well, one of the narrative of the moments also is it may not be precisely that everyone's opposed to taxes. Many are, but that often the narrative it's the value offered, right? That all of us put money into something, and when and how we can articulate taxes as an investment in my community, and then people either very knowingly or subconsciously are essentially evaluating this trade. I've invested in my state, in my county, in my township, whatever, and then I evaluate what I've received back to it. So some of this feels also like a kind of storytelling exercise of there's a negotiation. Here's the value you get back for those investments. So, when you're talking to, I'm sure you get cornered at public events or otherwise, and someone hollering at you. I think it's one of the most beautiful aspects of American democracy is that I haven't met anyone who hasn't been yelled at. I think that's part of it. When you get pushed on that tax question of this is an expensive, tax heavy state, what is your narrative of the value you're creating for that investment residents are making?
Absolutely. So what do taxes pay? They pay for our shared priorities. If you want to have great public school system, guess what? Taxes are going to pay into that. If you want to be able to have transportation, roads that don't have potholes in it, and transit facilities that are reliable and being built so we can accommodate more, that requires tax, payers' dollars to go into that. If we want to have a clean environment, that requires an investment. If we want to be able to invest in our colleges and universities, that requires funding from taxpayers as well. But here's the thing that I'll say, Chris. I know we talk about taxes being increased and all, but I will tell you, in our last budget, we did not increase taxes for 87% of Marylanders. Either it stayed the same or it went down. We focused in on the high earners. We do believe that given the fact that they make more money than the average Marylander, that a little bit more that they can chip into taxes that benefits the greater good of the community. So as much as people don't want to pay taxes and we don't want to increase taxes, we have to remember that we're responsible for all Marylanders. And when everyone does good, we all do good.
I know I have a couple minutes with you, and I want to touch on a few things. One last question I think is maybe at the very heart of Technically's editorial strategy going back 20 years is if I want my reporting to be known for anything, it's this point of separating not small business and big business, but new business. And that entrepreneurship, for my telling, was always this third category that often gets overlooked, right? We talk a lot about big businesses, which makes sense. They do factually employ most Americans. And small business is very important culturally because it signals something about our community. Our coverage has always been very focused on new business, which typically don't have the same kind of representation because they're new, right? Like almost by definition, they don't quite matter. But this idea of where do jobs come from if it's often new business creation. So I'm just kind of curious about your relationship to entrepreneurship, how you view that as part of the Maryland spirit. How much is entrepreneurship ever coming up in strategy conversations, that you're having? What's entrepreneurship as part of your view of Maryland's future?
It's absolutely part of the, economy and part of the, the sphere that we're looking at. And to your point, entrepreneurship, look, I can tell you Governor Moore was an entrepreneur and small business owner, so he is very much focused on this. He wants to be able to build an economy where, especially young people, that they're not growing up just to get a job, but they're actually, we're raising them to think, to take calculated risk, to start new companies, not just to work for someone, but actually create a company of their own. So we very much are focused on this. But part of that also means that we got to have the capital available for entrepreneurs. Everybody's got a whole bunch of great ideas. We have, in the state, TEDCO that actually goes out and meets with entrepreneurs and pairs them up with venture capitalists and tries to bring them together so they can pitch their idea. To be able to launch an idea, to actually commercialize it, that's where the challenge rises. And so we try to build venues in which all players of this economy for entrepreneurs can fit together and come up and help one another out. So when we build these kind of platforms, they come together, they talk, they learn from one another. And I know they give a lot of constructive feedback at these. Entrepreneur, hey, you love your idea, sir, but here's the problem with it. And so there's a lot of innovative ways in which we can address it. And I believe there's actually, like, you can rent CEOs just for, a short period of time so they can help you through the process. So we want to encourage entrepreneurs, and we'd love to bring in new businesses to our state. And we're doing that. Look, Governor Moore always says every time he goes to a new state or new location, he's going to bring a business back. And that's the way I see it as well. Every time I go anywhere, I go meet with those business owners, and I really make a pitch for Maryland. All the great things Maryland has to offer, what I already alluded to earlier, and the fact that we are a small state, which means that we have less bureaucracy and we're able to deliver quicker than perhaps larger states.
And good shout out to TEDCO, well-regarded agency that certainly is putting entrepreneurship very much at the center. So shout out to Maryland. Not every state has quite as effective a program. I'm going to lose you in a minute. So a couple little things I'd love to touch on. One, just you mentioned Governor Moore a few times. Give me a little color in the lieutenant governor relationship. What's an average experience like with you and the governor? You guys having weekly one-on-ones, or is it phone calls late night? Give me a little window into you and Governor Moore's working relationship, when it happens and how it happens.
Absolutely. Chris, I always say that I have the best job in the world, and that is serving the people of Maryland. And then I say, and it gets even better than that, because I get to serve alongside Governor Moore. Let me tell you, he is an incredible leader, a visionary. He's a very compassionate person, has a great deal of empathy, and really knows exactly what it is that he wants to see Maryland move towards. And he's a collaborator. He brings everyone together. Now, as far as my relationship with the governor goes, let me tell you, I don't think the governor sleeps at all. Literally, he gets up, I believe, 4 or 5 in the morning, goes and works at the Naval Academy, which he moans and groans a little bit because he is an Army guy. But hey, you got to do what you got to do, and he is busy. Throughout the entire day. I don't think he goes to bed till 1 a.m. or so. Literally, there have been moments when I've texted him at 12:30 at night, and he will respond back immediately. That's who Governor Moore is. He is so in touch with people. I've never seen a person at his level that when you send a text to him, he will immediately reply back. And so we talk to each other on a daily basis. Absolutely. Right. We're both here at the State House. He's right across the hall from me. And if we can't see one another, we definitely call one another up or text one another. It's a great relationship, and I feel so privileged and so honored to serve alongside him.
What's the governor's name in your phone?
I just say Gov.
Gov. Did you say Gov? Is it G-O-V? Not West?
I call him Gov.
Yep. All right. Heard.
Less is more, Chris. Less is more.
Heard. I'm going to lose you. So send me out. I also was interested to see in your bio that you serve in the Council on Interfaith Outreach, I believe is the council. I feel like we're in a moment where we're searching for what the human soul is around artificial intelligence and the like. Could you preach to me for a sec? What is faith? What should faith teach us about artificial intelligence, identity, our moment of polarization, whatever you got? What does faith teach us that the rest of us can think about?
That's a really deep question, Chris. Thank you for that. So here's the thing. While technology can connect us in so many ways, in general, people are feeling more isolated than ever. And I hear that from my own kids. I hear that from people I meet across the state. And what that tells me is that's where faith can play such a big part, because faith and interfaith brings people together in ways no technology can ever do. And especially moments like this where people are feeling so polarized, faith can pull us back to something simpler. It's about listening. It's about judging less. It's about remembering the dignity in all the people that we're with. It's about our shared priorities together for humanity. So for me, it's about making sure that, look, AI is here, and it's not going away, but we need to stay grounded in the values that perhaps faith and family and community teach us. And I really believe that if we're going to move as a society together, progress can only happen if it brings people together and not, push us further apart.
Final words from Maryland Lieutenant Governor Aruna Miller. Lieutenant Governor, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Chris.
See you next time.